Hello, everyone. My name is Ed Reyes. I started a band a long time ago called Taking Back Sunday, and I was a former guitarist for the band for many, many years.
Hi, I'm Matt Rubano. I played bass in Taking Back Sunday and on the records Where You Want to Be, Louder Now, and New Again.
Hi, my name is Fred Mascherino, and I was the guitarist and second vocalist for Taking Back Sunday on the records Louder Now and Where You Want to Be.
I remember when we were coming to the end of Where You Want to Be, we were starting to talk to major labels, and I was really afraid of major labels because that's not how, that's not what I was into. I was from the underground, hardcore, punk rock, emo scene, whatever you want to call it. And we're all about DIY and keeping it real. And here I am in a band that's doing really well, and all these labels are wanting to sign us, and all these producers are coming and talking to us. So I was freaked out. I was scared as hell.
We were sort of doing a couple of different things at the same time. We were finishing the touring on the record. We were starting to talk to major labels and also sort of starting to get untethered from Victory Records.
That was definitely a crazy time. If someone wanted to sign us, they would show up. We were out on tour. I remember one time being flown in a private jet to Leor Cohen's house. Jason Flom was there, and we flew in between shows, like to New York City to his Manhattan apartment. Another time we went to Gary Gersh's house, who's the guy that signed Nirvana to Geffen. This guy Lou from Capitol Records showed up constantly. That dude must have went to 40 shows. I can't believe we didn't sign to Capitol. And then we wound up signing with Warner Brothers with our A&R guy at the time was Craig Aronson. Rest in peace, my man. You know, my first record, Where You Want to Be, was rounding down. The tour was ending, but we were getting ready to do it all over again.
I remember particularly toward the end of Where You Want to Be and before we started, all of what went into, making Louder Now, that we were like, kind of had just come home from war and we were ready for another one. Considering a producer for the record that would become Louder Now, um, along with all of the other kinds of things that go with signing to a major label, one of them is that you all of a sudden have this like stamp of approval, and by your merits and achievements, but this stamp of approval that now you have major label money that you can now meet any producer really, except for like probably Rick Rubin, that you can think of. All the producers are available to you now because you've just popped up on the radar of the major label music world.
Man, I loved meeting all these producers because that was something I had an interest in doing. So we met with Rob Cavallo, who did Green Day and did Black Parade. And I just talked to the guy about Van Halen the whole time. We met with Gil Norton, who recorded Foo Fighters' Everlong and the Pixies. And I just really wanted to just pick these guys' brains.
And then we met a guy who wore sweatpants. His name was Howard Benson. I believe he worked with Mike M. So he was another cool guy that we met. But I always remember his sweatpants.
And the name on our list that really kind of stuck out was Eric Valentine. When I heard Queens of the Stone Age songs for the deaf was one of the first times that I went rifling through the CD booklet, because that's how long ago it was, to find out who made this fucking record, who made this thing that all of a sudden drums and guitars sounded the way they were always supposed to sound to me. But Eric didn't really come with he wasn't trying to woo us. He wasn't trying to be cool. He didn't pull up in a Ferrari. I don't even think he was wearing fucking shoes.
So we met with Eric Valentine at Barefoot Studios. And I didn't understand why it was called Barefoot Studios. But then I realized Eric was a really cool, chill, hippie-ish like dude who never wore shoes, and drove a mom van that was like falling apart. but he was just absolutely amazing. He was just the coolest dude.
And he wasn't like trying to like be our cool uncle who totally understood where we were coming from and was just one of us. He was like, you'll make the record with me or you won't.
Yeah, I feel like we all picked Eric for different reasons. Mark O'Connell liked the drum sounds on the old Good Charlotte stuff. Adam was a huge Third Eye Blind fan. Those were both bands Eric produced. And I just in general thought that he was a monster producer and that it was definitely going to sound great.
To set the scene of what our time at Ultrasound in New York City was like, we loaded in all of our touring gear and then some to, a New York City sized rehearsal room. So not as big as my office here. But, so we had all these huge road cases and all of our guitars and basses and amps and stuff like that.
I used to take the train in every day. I used to live in Forest Hills, Queens. It was like right a block over from Madison Square Garden. But go up to the 5th floor, open the elevator door, and our studio was right there. It was crazy.
Yeah, we would go to that rehearsal spot to write, and we would go Monday through Friday. We'd all show up at noon, and we'd play till about 5 every single day. Most days at 5, we would go out to eat afterwards. There was a place called Home on 5th, which I think was on 7th Street, so I didn't get that, but they had the most amazing spring rolls in the world, and we would eat like 5 of them each. Then after we had dinner, Adam and I would go back to the spot, and the other guys would go home. And if we had written some music that day, whatever we were working on, me and Adam would try to put lyrics to the music. And then that would evolve because as we put lyrics to it, we would want to change the music. So then we'd come in the next day and tell the guys what we wanted to change and try to work that out. And we continue to do this week after week because there was a deadline. We had a point where we were going to be meeting with Eric and we had to have an album written by then.
But I remember doing pre-production. Eric Valentine just sitting there, no shoes on, looking at us once in a while, looking down in his pad, writing something down that didn't know. Probably just things that we sucked at that he was going to make better, which he did.
And I remember pitching some ideas where Eric used to just make this face at me where he'd go, like he'd be considering it, but you could tell that he had already decided it was shit. But with him, it never felt like, oh, this guy doesn't think my idea is cool. It sort of like gave me pause to be like, oh yeah, that's not a great idea. That's just an idea.
Yeah, when Eric showed up in New York, I think we were all just learning from him. We knew what was on the line, and we just kind of had to trust him to have the answers that we needed to get this mammoth project done.
It was just like he would help us kind of unearth the most TBS version of this song. For example, Make Damn Sure was like the most like piecemeal, right? Am I using that correctly? Like it was like a potluck dinner where like we each had some aspect of that song loaded up and ready to go. And, much like 5 people trying to do the same puzzle at once, it was not working for a while. I remember for my like contribution to that song, and it sounds so dumb, but I was, this was during a time where I was actually living with my mom. And because we were on tour so much, that was my answer for why I was living with my mom. We were on tour so much, I didn't really need a place. And I would sleep in her den, and that was like my room. And I would finish most nights in there. Sorry, Mom, like smoking pot out the window and listening to music or watching movies, or I have my basses there and I'd be practicing. And one night, this is during that ultrasound time, because my mom lived in Queens and ultrasounds in Manhattan in Midtown. And I remember listening to Aphex Twin one night, and because of like the secondary harmonics or something, like I was listening to one of these tracks that had like a ton of like subby stuff going on and really busy drums. And I had heard this like root note motion that was basically the like, the G, B, D sort of like that triad thing, and then the rest of the chords for Make Damn Sure. And I sort of heard it, and then I also heard like the pre-chorus, and I'm really just talking about the bass notes, not the rest of the song, and brought that in. And then I think in combination with like a drum, like a drum idea that Mark had, and then Fred ended up sort of building out those sections and had the chorus ready to go. It was like this real Frankenstein, considering the sort of like, polished rock pop kind of song that it is now.
Yeah, so the bass line Matt had was like, and then I think Adam had the idea of putting a note after each one, that rhythm that it came out as. And Adam had like the best lyrics for that verse. But I got really excited when I heard the pre-chorus, the we lay together, just not too close, too close. And I was playing that riff that's actually at the end. And that was kind of where Eric came in. So basically we had this demo and I was playing this part here. And Eric said, you're playing exactly where the vocal is singing and it's getting in the way of the vocal. He said, can you play it an octave higher? And that wasn't really the most convenient suggestion, because in order to play it up here, I have to go up to the highest note on my guitar, the high D at the 22nd fret. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to have to sing and play this, and it's going to be a pain in the ass.
Every great song probably has this very bloody emergency room surgical situation behind it, where you're just like, all right, close the door, don't let anybody see that, and you just offer up the results, offer up the song, and it seems like, wow, those guys are great, but you'd never know that there were like 6 months of fighting and arguing and vying for your idea. And then Eric comes in and he's just like, everybody chill, and then he would help us assemble it. And that was one of the things he really helped us do. And man, it's crazy to think about, if it wasn't him or if it was somebody else, what would have happened. But yeah, you probably end up making a completely different record.
So I remember when we were ready to record Louder Now, we all moved to LA.
Eric's studio was in Los Angeles, and Taking Back Sunday was mostly an East Coast residing band, all of us at that point. Yeah. And so we up and moved to Los Angeles for the making of Louder Now as brand new Warner Brothers signees, and like kind of like straight out of That Thing You Do, like, we're going to the coast, baby.
Yeah, we went to LA at the end of the summer on August 30th, and we were there until the day before Christmas Eve. That was the day I flew home.
If I remember correctly, I think Fred had his family out there with him, so they had their own place, and I shared a place with Adam. And all those, like, if you remember all those like kind of goofy webisodes we used to make, the only one I can think of right now is like with a little wind-up toy, and Adam and I playing with it on the kitchen counter, and we used to shoot some like weird videos in there. Those were all in that apartment. And then I suppose Eddie and Mark lived together as well, but we were all kind of scattered all over this property.
Yeah, we lived in these apartments, we rented cars, and we were living the LA life, driving back and forth to the studio and working all day, sometimes all night on Louder Now.
Yeah, we were in that studio. Our schedule was Monday through Saturday, so we did 6 days a week from about 9:30 a.m. till 11 or 12 at night. If we got behind on schedule, we would actually do Sunday as well. So I was really thankful that I was able to have my family out there. But in 4 months, I think there were, a handful of days that I was actually able to spend the day with my kids. It was we were out there to work. It was tough, I got to be honest.
Like it or not, there was an intense amount of pressure on us to nobody ever says it. Nobody is ever like, you better make the best fucking record you can. But that's implied by, labels signing you. It's really some mafia shit. When we finally got set up at Barefoot at Eric's place, we did like a couple of days of like live pre-production. And one of the things that was so cool about it was, as one of the, sort of self-proclaimed loudest bass players there is, he had, we had to keep our volumes down in this room because the main purpose of this pre-production time period was to get the drum sounds, to keep the drum tracks that Mark was playing, and then we would go back and re-record everything else. And in order to sate my desire to like want to really hear and feel myself playing while not ruining Eric's brilliant like miking of the drum kit, he had built like this tiny wooden platform, about 4 feet by 4 feet. And it had like an oscillator under it or some kind of, I don't know what he had under there. It was just, I saw wood. Under it was science shit that Eric had built. This platform would basically vibrate along with whatever I was playing. And my stage volume, my amp volume was like 1 or half. Barely audible. And then of course I had headphones on for my mix, but the sensation of standing on that platform or sitting on it was like the same as like being on stage in an arena with 2 giant 8x10s behind you.
I think that was the biggest lesson that I learned from Eric Valentine, that if you had a problem or if you wanted to get a sound, there was always a way to get there. It might be a pain in the ass, but like there's always like a physical solution that you can practically do. And it always seemed like we were doing something crazy, but if you just stood back and looked at the problem from far away, you would go, oh, I see what we can do. And then we do it. And that's like pretty much like no matter what it was, though. For example, Eric had this desire to record a kick drum from far away. But the problem is if you put the kick drum mic far away from the kick, you're going to get a lot of the kit and especially the cymbals into that mic. So what he did was he built a wall around Mark's drum kit. And I believe there was like plexiglass on top, but around the bottom, it was like plywood. And that was to block the cymbals from coming out. And then he actually cut a hole the size of the kick drum, a circle in the wall. And put the kick drum through the wall so that he could put this mic 10 feet out and get the kick drum from back then, get this huge sounding kick drum without getting the splash of the cymbals right away. And that was just crazy. They were doing that the day we showed up. And I was like, what in the hell is going on here?
I played this like black Fender jazz bass, 1972 jazz bass during a lot of that time period. We started tracking with that bass one day and I was really like into playing it. And we were getting this kind of weak signal. It was vintage pickups and they hadn't really been taken care of. So I remember just in the middle of, I think it was like spin or something. And I just remember him being like, hold on. And we paused and he was like, let me take a look at that. And he took the bass back into his workroom, little workshop area. And we this is not crazy, but right then and there on the spot had like pulled out the pickups, put some others in there, replaced it. The bass sounded monstrous. And then it was just like all systems go.
That's never not fun to play. What's it feel like to be a ghost? So this guitar is a 1960s Silvertone. It's called a Jupiter or a Stratotone. And this is the kind of guitar that I used for that intro on What's It Feel Like to Be a Ghost. Eric had one of these. We used it on several songs. When I got home, these things were only like $300 or $400 at the time. I bought one, and I was so excited to tell Eric that I bought it. And he's like, yeah, everyone who records at my studio and uses that winds up buying one.
He asked me to play for the main like riff of What's It Feel Like to Be a Ghost. We just couldn't get it as heavy as we wanted, and an octave pedal didn't do it, and it's kind of a mess anyway. And Eric was like, had a 12-string bass handy, which is not maybe what you're immediately thinking of. It's not a bass whose fingerboard is like this wide with, a high C triple sharp string or anything like that. It is a 4-string bass, essentially, with 4 groupings of 3 strings together. So you are, for every one note you're playing with your left hand, you're holding down 3 strings and playing it with a pick, of course. The riff from What's It Feel Like to Be a Ghost is not terribly difficult to play, but on a 12-string, it was just like working out. It was like sending my hands to the gym. But when I heard the sound, when I heard the way it sat in the track, it was like, of course, this is the thing. And then I was like, fuck, am I going to have to get one of these?
What's it feel like to be a ghost? I know that Fred and Adam came up with that sick opening riff. And then the verses, I came up with the heavy, chunky part because it just reminded me of, like, one of my favorite songs that Quicksand wrote, Walter Schreifels wrote, was a song called Shovel. And it was on one of the best compilations that nobody knows about. Well, people know about it, but not everyone. Everyone should know about it. But it was a comp called the Antimatter comp. And anyway, the song was called Shovel. And it had a riff in it that went dun, 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 dun. It was the sickest chunk riff. And I've always wanted to do something like that. So that's where I got inspired to do the chunky part in Ghost, which is still one of my favorite songs. Every time I play that song, I get chills. I actually feel cool at a show when we open with that.
We labored over every single detail.
We would basically do 34 takes of everything. Like, even if it was just one chord we had to hit, it was like 30 times before we got the take that Eric wanted. And I got a little frustrated doing vocals. I remember taking a jab at Eric and saying, hey, man, they invented this thing in the 90s called auto-tune. Because it got to the point where I would have rather had him tune me than sing it another 35 times. He didn't think that was too funny, though.
I remember Eric being like, hold on. And he would spacebar, which was also another famous Ericism. With like, you'd be doing takes and you'd be playing like kind of good, hot shit. And you'd play one take and it would finish and he'd stop you in the middle and he'd just go, you'd hear the sound of this, like the click of the spacebar and Eric going, and again.
And he had a little space bar on his computer and he would hit it and go, and again, and again, and again, to the point where I'll go, and again, Eric? And you go, yes, and again.
It also wasn't arbitrary. Eric's ears were like eagle's eyes. He was just like, he really knew when you nailed it and also knew when you didn't. And, once he got a feel for what you were capable of, he would push you until you had done it.
His bizarre talent at hearing things you don't hear. Like, if my guitar was buzzing weird, he would put tape here and tape there and tape here and then go, okay, now just do that. And again. And again. And then I would accidentally do something. He'd go, ooh, that's good. Do that again. I'm like, I don't know. That was an accident. And he goes, no, you went. He would know that my pick accidentally scraped against the chord to make a sound. So for 2 hours, I was sit there going.
Anything that was like a unison part, like those hits at the end of Spin, right? Like right before the bridge, boom, when we're all like kind of locked up. Like with Eric, you very much knew in those moments like if you had nailed it or not, and like it was really eye-opening to like sit with him as you heard the vision that the band had for the song become more clear and then exceed the expectations we had. And that was like what a lot of making that record was like. It was like, oh, we wanted to do this thing, and then we had really like surpassed even our own expectations, which you know, for any artist, that's more than the goal. That's beyond the goal, right?
So it was 15 years ago. I was a much younger man, and I think a lot of people do wonder about this. But all these things put together, by 3 months into this thing, we still had another month, and Adam and I were the only ones left tracking. I remember I was tracking, and Eddie went home with his wife because she was pregnant at the time, and Mark was down in Bermuda, and I was getting really frustrated because I had to be there all the time. Like, I was in charge of arranging the music, so I was getting called in. Does this melody note work over this chord? Is this bass fill work with the vocal? Drum fills. It didn't really matter what it was. I was the one in charge of giving it the TBS side stamp of approval. Eric suggested what he could, but it needed to be our record, so I always had to be there. I would try to leave and go back to the apartment, and he would say, "I need you here." And it was a big moment for me because I eventually, said something to Eric. Again, I was a younger guy, and I was like, "This isn't fair." Like, I'm here day in and day out, 6, 7 days a week, and I'm the only one that has to be here the whole time. And he kind of was like, "You dummy. Don't you see what you're learning here? You're basically getting a college education in producing records." All that time that I spent with him, I could feel my own ears getting better as I was there day after day. And he said, when you leave here, you're not just going to have one record, you're going to have a whole new set of skills. And that one conversation, it honestly changed my life. It was by far the most work I've ever done on a project. It was the hardest record to get done. And I just didn't know if I could go through it a second time if we were to make more records together. Of course, now at my age now, like, I think I would have handled it a lot differently. I would have appreciated the opportunity that I had a lot more. But, you know,
um it really, like before even sitting down to do this is really where it occurred to me that it's been 15 years since Louder Now came out. And it's strange. I mean, I live right now like a mile and a half from the studio where we recorded it.
Louder Now turns 15. That's a long time ago. I think Taking Back Sunday was doing what Taking Back Sunday does. And we were just writing a record, and we know that it was going to be good because, let's all be honest, we were a really good band.
When we made the record, I never really thought like, oh, this is something that's going to stick around and echo and influence other people and things like that. You can't really ever appreciate that, of course, until time has gone by. But I mean, even on other musical projects that I've worked on in the last couple of years, there's been this really strange kind of like nostalgifying of that era, the sort of big emo era. And in working with like, rappers or hip hop artists, or R&B tracks, or just like pop artists. And it's really crazy how the sort of like influence of emos proliferated all these other sounds, even if it's just like an aesthetic or an attitude or whatever. But there have been times where I'll be on like a project or on a session or something, and someone will be like blown away by the fact that I was in Taking Back Sunday.
I go and do these emo nights, and at first I question it because I'm not playing music at these things, and I don't, it's definitely out of my comfort zone to be there. But I realized when I went that those are our fans. Like, that's where I can go and still hang out with all the people that listened to us back in the day.
Louder Now was one of the hardest records to work on, but it was also very natural the way we wrote it. We didn't do anything different like we do any other time. And it's just a very special record. It changed me a lot. It gave me confidence. Louder Now will always be one of my faves. It's a pretty good fucking record. Let's be honest. That's why people still play it. I mean, I still listen to it. And working with Eric Valentine changed my life.
When I look at the past 15 years since this record came out, there were some years when I first left the band that I was trying to distance myself a little bit from it, realizing that this record was such a monster, I was not going to escape its grasp. But I think that's mainly because it really is something that I'm still really proud of that I did. I think we made a really unique, standout, well crafted record. We did everything to the fullest that we could do it. And obviously, I love all those songs that we made together. I still text those guys and try to keep in touch. We all went through something together that changed us. And because of that, I think we'll be connected for our entire lives. And that's just how it is. And I'm cool with that, man. I love those guys. I also want to say to the people that are still sticking around after 15 years, thank you so much. I mean, this record was basically concocted from all of our dreams, and you are still keeping this dream alive all these years later.